I want to apologize first. I have a very bad bronchial cold, and if you have trouble in hearing, we have turned up the microphones, we think, high enough. If it's too high, come back one of these days and we'll give you a free opportunity to hear the same lecture again. The subject this morning is an important one, and it's based very largely on the writings of St. Paul. It seems that it was recognized in ancient times that the redemptive principle in life was a very sacred one, and that this redemptive principle had to do with the human soul. And we find the first expression of Paul's concept in the Song of Solomon, the Canticles. In the Song of Solomon, the king addresses the fair maiden of Jerusalem, and he says, "My beloved is mine." A good, masculine, possessive statement. Halfway through the poem, however, he changes his tune a little bit. He says, "My beloved is mine, and I am my beloved's." And at the end of the poem, he says the simple words, "I am my beloved's." The whole change of tone shows what we might call the redemptive power of love. First it was possessive, gave very little and took all. Then it became more or less democratic, gave some and took some for the beloved. And at the end it gave all. And this is the principle of the idea as it is found in the Bible. This is why St. Paul speaks so strongly of love. The greatest of these is love, and that it is the great redemptive power. That this power is the thing that takes people, lifts them out of themselves, and makes them the custodians of nations and of great world's works. The idea, consequently, of the redemptive power goes into alchemy, where we find it is the transmutation of various factors into the production of the universal medicine. Actually, we have the transmutation of personal emotion into divine emotion. We have a power that lifts the individual out of his own concerns and brings him into sharing with the universal purpose. The ancients nearly always had some deity upon which they wished and adored with the various faculties of their possessions. This idea of the giving all as the proof of ultimate affection goes on, and to St. Paul finally establishes it, more or less, in the human heart. That instead of the heart being the seat of deity, the deity remained forever in the infinite. But the redemptive power of deity was the power in the heart of the individual which redeemed him and which enabled him to redeem his world. Therefore, the redemptive power to change all things to make them better is in the heart of the individual. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Well, in the course of time, we see that times have changed, and the individual now thinks very largely of himself. He thinks of his whole nature being his own. He doesn't realize that there is within him a part of a redemptive power in the universe, the redemptive power of selfless love. Anyone can be selfish with a little practice, and most people are without much practice. But it is very rare to find a person who is completely dedicated to a redemptive way of life. This redemptive way of life is the giving of self completely, the giving of personal considerations, all for the advancement of some cause greater than themselves. And this cause can be the redemption of their own natures, or the redemption of a family, or in higher postures, the defending and remending of a nation. It was all possible according to this thought that we have. Now, bringing this very sensitive thing down to our own personal living, there are things we can all learn from this, things that we will be much better to know and understand. In the individual himself, there is a power by means of which he is capable of transmuting nearly all of the difficulties and problems of his existence. This transmuting power is the power of love. The heart is the great crucible. It is the great alchemical receptacle in which a great transmutation is constantly taking place. In the old Rosicrucian manifestos, the heart is represented as a universe in itself, with elements and universal symbols. There are old penitentiary and Central European symbols of the crucifixion taking place in the human heart. Everything that is religious is centered in the heart, which is on the crest of Mount Moriah outside of Jerusalem, according to the anatomy of the sacred body of God. So we have now this problem of the redemptive factor that is in the person. This redemptive factor becomes, or should become, the guiding light of their lives. It is not that they should omit to reveal the deity who is the Lord of all things, but recognize that within themselves is a regent capable of administering to the needs of human beings. This regent is love. Love is that which goes before self. True love is unselfish. The moment it is selfish, it is not true. Now, in the course of time and in the descent of civilizations into one kind after another, love has gradually been profaned until it becomes very largely a material emotion. And we also want to realize that as this happens, many changes take place in the constitution of the individual himself. As his emotions change, so does his health, so does his happiness, so does his securities in life, and so do his hopes and his hope for life beyond. All these things have to do with what happens in his own heart while he is alive. We have a world today with all kinds of terrible problems. And almost all these problems center on one or two things that we can easily notice. In the various contests that arise, which one is moved or regulated by unselfish love? What nation is trying best and continuously to use all it means to create peace, to create happiness, to take care of the needy, to advance the causes of gentle arts and crafts? What leader is without personal selfishness? What leader is uncorrupted by temptation? In other words, which one is following the renovating power of the heart? As long as there is corruption in the heart, the fate of nations is under stress and under delay. We say, therefore, that in the heart we have the beginning of character, we have the beginning of integrity, we also have the beginning of a collapse of these things as selfishness gradually takes over. There's a little Sicilian church that is very interesting. It has the heart as a symbol in the church, and in the heart the devil is enshrined in a beautiful chapel on a crown, with a crown and a throne. In other words, the devil is, in that case, is enthroned in the heart. This would be a symbol that individual is depraved or degenerate or has turned his life over to evil things. But the redemption of man is very largely achieved by the regulation of the instincts and appetites and ideals of his heart. So we take this as a possible basis for a new relationship between man and society. We know that in the years that lie ahead, many changes must come. And we are all hoping and we are praying that these changes will come soon. We hope that leaders will arise who will correct these mistakes, that peoples will rise and band and force and overcome the tyrants. But the trouble will probably be that the people will have to become first tyrants themselves in order to overcome the tyrants. So there lies ahead nothing but conflict, nothing but uncertainty. We have not yet realized, however, that it is impossible to legislate peace. We may be able to legislate against a certain type of violence, but we will never be able to legislate against violence itself unless it dies first in ourselves. The individual must overcome in himself all of the errors which he sees and complains about in society around him. He must look upon the world as a picture of a heart. He must look upon the nations as blood vessels. He must look upon cities as cells. He must look at the human body as a nation, or the nation as a human body, and that it is controlled by a heart. Now, where is this heart? What is it? What is it doing? Well, there are over 150 nations. Therefore, the heart is not one organ. It is an organ for each. But above everything else, there is a common organ. There is something that we must all work for and strive to maintain, and that is the divine heart, the heart of the mystic, the one heart in ourselves, which together with all others of a similar nature creates the one heart of an evolving civilization. Until the individual himself redeems his own nature, he cannot expect civilization to improve. There is too much against the things that are necessary. Paul also goes back into the Scriptures to find many other interesting analogies to his point, namely that he has moved the concept of Christ from the heavens and placed this concept in the human heart. Christ in you, the hope of glory. And that this Christ in you is the christened consciousness of heart. It is love in the final, unselfish, eternal mood. Love that thinks not of itself, but of all things. Love that does not cherish its own properties, but protects the properties of all. In other words, there is a love that is personal, love of individual for individual, a love of friend for friend, love of leader for leader. But there is another heart and another love, and that is the complete, total love of God as manifested in the heart of man. Therefore, that we have in man's own heart the great peacemaker. It is not only the pacemaker, but the peacemaker. It is the one great organ of integrities. It is the dedication to this that proves the individual's dedication to God. And by proving dedication to God, protects civilization from corruption. The dedicated person will not be correct, will not be covetous, or do things that are wrong. The undedicated person will occasionally do something right, but will usually be mistaken or ineptable in their works and doings. They will be inadequate. After, therefore, that we take all this, we say, in the heart we have this center, the center that represents our whole kingdom of life. The whole world of the beloved begins in the heart and grows as a seed, and grows from that seed to a great tree that is for the healing of the nations. And this tree is the human soul arising from the great root in the heart. Now, the way this was originally intended is that there should be faiths, philosophies, and doctrines that would be developed by the heart concept and turned over to the keeping of the heart enlightened people. When we have a new discovery in music or a new discovery in anatomy and physiology, the righteous person immediately dedicates this discovery to the world good. The individual places his discovery upon the living altar of his God, as this altar is in his own heart. If he makes a great discovery in science, he dedicates it to the need of the world. If he makes a great discovery in diplomacy, he dedicates that. If he wants to write a great book, he dedicates that. All these things are lifted up and dedicated upon the altar of eternal good. They are no longer held for an individual. They are no longer kept finally and completely for royalty or something of this nature. You don't worry by selling. It isn't something in which you immediately sell and make all you can for yourself. Everything that is necessary to man must come to man through man. And when that thing comes, it comes to his heart, and from his heart it is released to the world because he is a good religious person. So we find that there is an absence of this religion. We find people doing all kinds of things for their own advantage, not for the advantage of the common good. And as this continues in this direction, problems will become more and more strenuous. This is one of the reasons, probably, why in antiquity we had so many orders set aside of people for various types of worship. We had various groups that renounced the world and worldliness and lived fully and completely to serve the human need. We had brotherhoods and sisterhoods of sacred persons. We had temples of healing. We had temples of wisdom. All of them serving this mysterious power of good in the heart. For all of these enlightened individuals were enlightened into comradeship, into a state of brotherhood, a state of natural loving, which was, in fact, the redemptive power in every case. The individual is redeemed when he overcomes his own selfishness. He overcomes his own egotism. He gives up the false prides and false activities which make him dangerous to himself and others. Therefore, the regeneration of society begins with returning the leadership of life to the matchless altar of the human heart. Therefore, working in our studies in this series that we're working on, we are going to work on the concept of love. Not just simply ordinary love, but not ignoring it, but trying to make it understandable why this is one of the most powerful transmuting agencies available to the human being. It is something that is his own. It is something that very often begins as a joyous or glorious experience. It is something in which everything becomes easier and more beautiful. It is something in which problems such as temptation are done away with before they have a chance to actually arise. If each individual in his own way served truth to the best of his abilities, there would be no war. But we can pass laws against wars for 100 years and still have them, because the change has not been made in the deep centers of the human soul. Now, the ancient beliefs were to the effect that the human soul was, in a sense, the beginning of a new being in man. This human soul was a spiritual being created all the time by the person. The beginning of the human soul was always the seed of divinity, which is in the heart and which is served and helped to develop by considering the heart as a garden in which all kinds of plants and things were growing. In this heart the tree of life grew, and the tree of good and evil, the leaves of which were for the healings of the nations. And this tree that grew up in the heart was by the ancients called the soul. And the soul seed was the mysterious, magical, transmuting agency of alchemy. Now, this soul seed in the human heart is the thing that is growing by this process of redemption, of transmutation, and of the restoring of principles. And it is not visible, but Paracelsus and many others made pictures of it. It was this fact that in the heart of man there is not only this wonderful presence of the divine power, the power of love, infinite love, but this infinite love is the cradle of a new life, a new existence, a new order of being, a new way of existence. This little cradle, so to say, is like the manger, in Nazareth. It is born in the stable. The stable is the body, which is physical, surrounded by animals, the organs of the body, living in a material world, threatened from the beginning, but destined and foreordained to exist, to endure, to continue, and in the end, to become the healing of the nations. So we have all this tied into the heart, and all of it is part of one thing. For out of this dedication to the principles involved, we find the gradual rising of the soul constitution. In other words, the heart, with its true affection, is telling us the story of its own quality. In other words, love, unselfish love for all that exists, is the force flowing from the soul, from that power which is created in man, but goes on to eternity. The soul is the body, a part of man, which has a beginning but no end but eternity. Its seed is that of ages of evolution and growth. It goes on to become the final Lord of all that lives. And in all parts it is beautiful. In all parts it is good. Its virtue is complete. There's no evil or no transiency in it. And so the mystics developed whole sciences relating to the soul, relating to the heart and its mystery, relating to the renovative power of emotion. Now, as we get down a little further into the problem of heart as a representation of soul, we come also to daily life. We have all kinds of love. We're going to take up some of them in the present series. We have love of country, of patriotism. Now, it can be very secondary. The average individual probably isn't at any particular time anxious to go out and die for his country, but it's the country, he respects it, and he supports it in its emergencies, and when it calls, he answers. Then there is the love of nature, the love of going out and commuting quietly with the flowers and plants, the love of going out and sitting by the mountainside and contemplating the beauty of the infinite. And in this beauty that it contemplates, the heart and mind experience something of the divinity that lives and develops through all things. Then, of course, there is other types of love of art, great paintings, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, works of art that have been loved and cherished by centuries, among the great and noblest products of human being. Not so ancient, but also so renovated and revered, is music, which has always been part of the story of human rehabilitation. The harmonies of music are symbolical of the harmonies of the soul. And when music is distorted, it is distorted by the distortions in the soul which permit it. If the soul did not permit it, it would not be so distorted. So the soul must be brought into order. It must be refined, reformed, and built into the realization of that which was good. And all through life there are jobs of every kind that you can take. There's profession, there's work, there's art, music, all these different classes of occupation. All of them containing the mystery of this wonderful heart story. There is in every art and science part of the soul. The soul is the source of all beauty, of all virtue, and of all good. And in appearance it is all invisible to the eyes, but visible to the inner nature as peace. Peace and harmony. Peace and friendship. Peace in the family, in the community. We are now in a period of time in which families are in great difficulty. There doesn't seem to be any way of controlling the various pressures that have arisen. Well, most of the trouble is due to the fact that nowhere now is it obvious that we are actually dealing with a direct expression of the heart principle. We have all kinds of occupations and our recreations, but most of them are selfish, self-centered, or unimportant. We do not have our joys arising from great foundations, but from trivia. Instead of recognizing the tremendous import of the universe itself as the greatest of all instruments, we are satisfied to sit around and play on a banjo out of tune, thinking that we are doing something quite unusual. We are so unusual it should never be done. And we go on with these things, and we find we're living in a universe in which we are simply doing nothing with the best part of it. We are living to fill the active pursuits of the day, most of them self-centered. We are there trying to make a few extra dollars. We are trying to advance various causes or advance ourselves in various positions in nature and in business, but no thought of the great internal integrities upon which our own lives and the life of everything we know depends. The human being is not simply a little isolated creature in a desert of waiting. We are not simply isolated, left alone to hope and to fear, to live and to die by forces that we know nothing about. We are here as part of one tremendous plan. We are here because of the eternality of ourselves. We are here because we are the potential laborers in a tremendous enterprise. The whole universe waits upon the labors of its creatures, and we are sitting around wondering why something better doesn't happen. We are not working with these things. We are not accepting the challenge of right use. And yet there have been enough people all down through the way to have used these things well to be able to show us what way to go. It's perfectly possible to understand music or philosophy or religion. These things have been engineered. They have been brought forward from the past. They have been put in reasonable order and arrangement. There is no reason why there should be anything so strange and impossible about them. For a few $100s, we can take a series of lessons on toe ballet music, dancing. We also can, for a few $100s, get a recipe for taking off overweight. We can get almost anything we want. But why do we never want the things that are most important? Why is it that we do not recognize the tremendous importance of releasing from its captivities the power in ourselves which alone can solve our problems? Why is the soul not given control of the life? It is because of the same type of thing that we find very much today with young people. We do not want to give up the possession of our faculties and accept our own judgment as inadequate. We do not want to allow the superior to rule. We are not the superior, or the superiority of ourselves is not ruling. Therefore, we want to continue on our own way, making the same mistakes as final proof that we are free and equal. We are not free, and we are equal only to the mediocre. Therefore, there's nothing gained whatever. But here now, we're coming to the end of another generation. There's been lots of talk about what's going to happen in the 21st century. And we look around us, and it seems to be a little more ominous all the time. Something seems to be in the air, something that's a little frightening, a little disturbing. And in this emergency, a number of groups of people are coming forward to study a little more deeply the problems which we face. And one of the most interesting discoveries that is being made is that no one has really addressed the problem. We have all talked about it ever since writing was invented. But when we allowed someone to mention that it interfered with our way to do exactly as we please, it was better to shut up the individual who mentioned it than try to make the correction. Therefore, we have gone on doing exactly what we wanted to do. On a sort of a formula, we want to be right, but right or wrong, we're going to be ourselves. So they come into the verge of another century. But we have been ourselves so long that it's becoming a more or less dangerous and difficult situation. We are wasting the world around us and starving the world within us. We are making every possible effort to kill off the source of our own survival, and at the same time begging desperately for that survival. We are now working and thinking in terms of going into other planets rather than to clean this one up. I saw an article not long ago in which some humorist pointed out that the best way to get over this congestion and corruption is to move somewhere else and leave this as the garbage pail. And this type of thing we are beginning to realize, but not to the degree that it may change us. Other people should do better. But why don't we change? Because there's only one way to change, and that is by changing this thing inside. And most people don't even believe it exists. And if they do believe it exists, they hope it'll keep quiet. Actually, the only way we can solve any of these problems